I
54.
No, you fuck. The original one or the one in history?
What's the original one?
The Rabbi Rayat.
Rabbi Rayatz. And what does it mean, the whole mimer?
The gun for mimer.
Good translation there. In reality, there's really 4 maimarim. It was what's called a hemshech of maimarim. The first one is the most famous one because that's the one we memorize and give over on the day of Yud Shvat. Yud Shvat is the day that the previous Rebbe passed away, and the following year, the Rebbe took on the Nesius. And so the Rebbe instituted a practice that the day of the Yurtzeit, we should review the Maimer Bal Peh, say it by heart, which means that by Mariv we say 2 chapters, and by Shachris we say another 2 chapters, and by Mincha we say another chapter. Someone memorizes the whole Maimer, and we say it over on Yud Shvat, which is coming up pretty soon. So we're going to do that ourselves. Can I have some volunteers who would like to memorize the Maimer? You don't have to memorize the whole thing. You can memorize 1 os.
I'll memorize it.
Who's going to do it?
Sounds right.
You're going to do it?
This is an os.
Which os are you going to memorize?
First one.
First os. Who's going to take the second os? How long is an os? It's work. No, it's about 1.5 pages in here. That doesn't look safe, does it? Anyway, I'm sure he knows what he's doing. Let's see if I can.
No, it's okay. The schach. It's the schach.
Fine, the schach is going to stop. Right. It said no one.
Wonderful. What a business.
Because I don't want you to trigger me. If I stay triggered, I will not talk to you until I'm gone. I'm planning on leaving.
Okay, so what about Os Base? Anyway, everybody has to be occupied in memorizing Basi Legani. This is going to be our new mivtza coming to Yud Shvat. You taking Os? Can't do it? Huh? Why not? You can memorize a mimer. Little kids can do it. Serious.
That's one thing I'm a baby. I'm not good at.
You do an Os? Why not? Of course you can. Try. Oh, you know what? Take on Os Base, and if you don't finish it, we'll understand.
I still didn't finish the first break of Tanya, and I've been trying for such a long time.
Basi Lagani, Basi Kala.
All right, guys, we have to take on.
Keep going, babe.
Let me put it like this: just the effort of trying it is also good. In other words, so you won't finish, so you'll spend a month breaking your head on not getting it. That's also good. No, everybody has to do it. It's not. I'm just picking out people because it's fun. But everybody has to be learning at least Os Aleph. You start with Os Aleph. If anyone wants to volunteer, we'll talk with you privately. Maybe I'll put a little more pressure on you in private. Then we'll do the whole mimer, B'ezrat Hashem. But this is what Chassidim are doing around the world right now, beginning to learn the mimer Basi Legani. Anyway, what do I mean by I say the whole mimer? So there's really 4 maimarim. The first one is what we memorize and so forth, but the other 3 maimarim complete all 20 osios, 20 chapters of the mimer. And what happened was, after the Rebbe became the Rebbe, then he did this kind of very fancy, amazing project, which was, he began his Nesias, he began the Rebbe, being the Rebbe, by saying the Maimer Basi Legani. And he said, in other words, he used the same Divrei HaMaschil, and he gave over the Maimer Basi Legani. But what? He gave over the first Maimer. In other words, he gave over a Chazara of the first Os of the first Maimer, Os Aleph. The next year, Yud Shvat came around again, he said another Maimer Basi Legani, but this year it became clear that he was giving over a Chazara on the second Os. And so he went for 20 years, giving over a different mimer on a different os. And over 20 years' time, he explained the total content of the entire mimer Basi Legani. 20 years' time is a long time, which means he was living with this mimer of the previous Rebbe forever. And when 20 years was over, guess what he did 21st year? He started over again. And he did the whole thing another 20 years. So we have 2 maimarim on each os of the original mimer from Basi Legani, from the Frierdiker Rebbe. We have 2 maimarim on each os from the Rebbe, spanning the entire Nesias of the Rebbe. So this is something very, very deep. In other words, the Rebbe was saying that the last mimer of a Rebbe is essentially like their final will. You know, it's like their instructions for the entire generation. So this is the instructions for the entire generation. I don't think last year we learned the whole thing. We might have learned just the first mimer.
One of my more. We've got to get to work.
It's 40 mimarim if you want to get into the Rebbe's Ostros. What's that?
Does it change between the first time review and the second time review?
Yeah, it's a completely different mimer. He gave two mimarim explaining the content of that particular os in two different ways in 20 years apart. So it's 40 mimarim plus the original. Anyway, so what happens is every year, then there's a certain chapter in the original Basi Legani that we're like, that's the chapter of this year, because even after 40 years, so we start the next 20 years, right? And even though the Rebbe wasn't there to give us Maimarim, we didn't forget the project, which means that there's an os. So let's see if it was Tafshin Yud Aleph. So we're going to be in Tafshin Ayin Zayin. It would be os Zayin Mustama, right? Os Zayin, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it's Vav.
Or os Ches. Zayin or
You
Ches.
said it was Tavshin Ayin Aleph?
This year is Tafshin Ayin Zayin.
So
Remember?
when did they
The whole
start?
Rosh Hashanah and everything. It was awesome. You were there.
When did they start?
What's that?
When did they start? Tavshin?
It started Tafshin Yud Aleph was the Rebbe's first review. So I guess it's Zayin, yeah. Anyway, Os Zayin. So we'll get there. So this year we're going to shoot for it. We'll see if we can get it. We have a month to go through the entire original Maimer Basi Lagani. There's so many different ways. That's why they said, did we learn this last year? I don't think last year we did that. I think last year we focused on just the os that we were in, and then I think we learned both Maimarim of that year.
We started beginning.
Right. So every year it's the same Maimer, but it's a completely different adventure. So this year though, I'd like, it's a real foundational to go through the whole thing, because essentially this is every little piece of this Maimer is something which is, as far as the Rebbe was concerned, the foundation, the groundwork for everything that takes place in our generation. The whole thing. So it's exciting. It's always at this time of year. It's very much like you begin a mission. And that's why I'm going to restate that this is not an optional thing. We're going to go for it in the yeshiva. We're going to all try to take upon ourselves a preparation of 30 days minimum to get ready for Yud Shvat, to prepare ourselves for the inauguration, as it happens every year, of the Rebbe's Nesias. And in order to do that, you have to work at something. The Rebbe said, the first thing he said when he took office, so to speak, was that I'm not doing this myself. I'll give my marim, but it's going to be a two-way street. You got to put some effort into it. And what does it mean, put effort? He's not putting a job on you. He's giving a gift to us. If we do what we have to do, make our efforts, then we'll have a Rebbe come Yud Shvat. So everybody should try to I think the proper preparation. You could do a lot of things. There's many avenues that you could choose, or you could talk to your mashpi about and figure out like just how to prepare properly. But nonetheless, this is certainly a classic, standard way. Break your head on trying to memorize a few lines of Basi Lagani. You won't go wrong. So we'll start now. Okay. So this is B'siyat Shemaya Shabbos Parshas Bo Yud Shvat Tavshin Yud. So it says in the bold in the beginning, this is the yurtzeit of the grandmother of the Frierdiker Rebbe, Rebbetzin Rivka. So he wrote this mimer for his grandmother. Then, if you go to the next mimer, but you don't have it in front of you, but I'll just shoot ahead. So it says the next mimer he wrote, in other words, there's 4 mimers in this series. The next mimer he wrote in the honor of his mother's yurtzeit. And whatever, the Rebbe oftentimes on Yud Shvat would actually address the women, because it seems like the whole thing is for the holy women that are connected with the Frierdiker Rebbe. So there's a special Farbrengen on Yud Shvat for women every year, and the idea is that Basi Lagani in general, which we're going to see in a second, it means that Hashem married the earth. So there's a huge sort of the woman is connected with the whole generation. It was like the rise of the sphere of Malchus and the return of the shechina. Anyway, so this is dedicated to his grandmother, and that's not an insignificant thing, being that every piece of this mimer is sort of drenching with meaning. Okay, so we'll begin. Basi Lagani achosi kala. Powerful words there. Okay, so he says, I come to my garden, my sister, my bride, right? Which is essentially Shlomo HaMelech writing in Shir HaShirim that Hashem is saying, I've returned to my garden, and he's addressing, Am Yisrael, his sister, his bride. In other words, he's returned to the wedding canopy, as we're going to see. Isa b'Midrash Rabbah. The Midrash Rabbah states on Shir HaShirim b'Mkomo, it says, Lagan ein kasiv kan ele lignuni, the ginuni. What is a ginuni?
Garden. My garden.
You want to buy garden?
Well, that's a gan. So ginuni is not a garden actually, and that's what it says in the Midrash. It says don't read the word gan, which is garden, but ginuni. It's a play on words. That gan is also sort of a description of something called ginuni. What's ginuni? It's a chuppah. A chuppah. So he's saying, I returned to my chuppah. I returned to my wedding chamber. And Hashem is saying, I've returned to my garden. The makom shayikari b'techila, meaning to say what? The place that I originally was. I've come to my garden. I'm translating as returned, because Hashem was already here one time, right? He was originally here, and now he's coming back. That's the connotation of Shlomo Melech. And Shlomo Melech is writing this. Shlomo Melech built the Beis Hamikdash. So he's saying that Hashem is coming back to his garden. He's coming back to his chuppah, the place where he was originally married to the world. Where was his original place that he was married to? The world. And now when he built the Beis Hamikdash, he's coming back and remarrying, so to speak, the world. The Ikar Shechina b'Tachtoni Haisa, because the main Shechina was in the Tachtoni. The first the Maimer of the Rebbe, the very first Maimer of the Rebbe that he ever wrote, is wholly concerned with these words. I won't say wholly concerned, but it's the sort of main, philosophical element of it is concerned with these words. The Ikar Shechina b'Tachtonim Haisa, that the main Shechina was down in the Tachton, down here in this world. What does it mean, the main Shechina? So see there, but ultimately what he's trying to say is there's many different levels of the Shekhinah, and all the way up to its very root, the Shekhinah is sort of rooted in the Atzmus. And when he says that the main Shekhinah was in the Tachtonim, he means that Hashem's original home of his very essence was married to this world. His presence was in this world. And that's why he says, I'm coming back to my garden, the place where I originally was. My essence was once in this world, and I'm going to bring it back. How did it leave in the first place? So from the sin of the Chet Eitz Hadas, the sin of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, Nistalka Shechina Maratz L'Rakia. So that's what really was the original sin, as they call it, that it removed the Shechina from the earth to the heavens. In other words, right away, already in Gan Eden, Hashem removed his Ikar Shechina from the earth and it went into the heavens. Kain ve'enosh nistalka shechina merakia aleph lebeis v'gomer v'gimel. So he says, and by the sin of Kain and Enosh, right, it was two further sins. They didn't have the same sin. There were two different stages of the world going into a state of indecency. So it pushed it further. The Shekhinah went from the first heaven to the second heaven, and then to the third heaven. And basically the generations just kept continuously pushing the Shekhinah further and further away from earth. And then afterwards, through the sin of the flood generation, it went from the third to the fourth. If you look in the Midrash over there, he brings all the different generations that pushed it all the way out. There was further ones, the dispersion here, he doesn't go on into the whole thing, but the Dur Haflaga, etc. There was different sins all the way till it pushed it right out of the world, out of all the heavens. K'de'is of Midrash Rabbah, as it's all brought there in the Midrash, al pasek v'yishmas kol avaya lukim ishalech bagan. So in the Midrash it brings the verse that after Adam sinned, it says he heard the voice of Hashem Elokim mishalech bagan, going in the garden. Right? And that's when he hid. And Hashem says Ayeka, right? So Amar Rabbi Abba says on this verse, he heard Hashem going in the garden. He says Mahalech ein kasiv kan ela mishalech. It doesn't say that he heard Hashem going in the garden as I translated it, but it says it in reflexive. He heard mishalech, he was going to himself in the garden. Kafitz va'azil. Yeah. The difference is, one is you're going, and one is you're going sort of, you're leaving, you're going into yourself. Misalech is a reflexive, means you're going into yourself. He's walking himself, that's what it means. As opposed to walking, he's walking himself. Where is he walking himself? So it says, kafitz va'azil. He was jumping and going. Meaning to say he jumped out of the world. So in other words, we could see a hint of this whole midrash. His hint is linked into this verse where it says that Hashem was going in the garden after the sin. Hashem jumped out of the earth. And he was going into himself. He left the earth behind. So that was a sad day. But afterwards, Amdu Shiva Tzadikim, 7 Tzadikim stood up to repair this error, because it was 7 heavens ultimately that he left. And they brought the shechina back down to earth. Avraham merited, and he brought first the shechina from the 7th to the 6th. Right? In other words, he pushed it all the way to the 7th heaven. He brought it down from the 7th to the 6th. Yitzchak mivav lehei. Yitzchak brought it from the 6th to the 5th. Etc., etc. There were 7 generations. Ad ki Moshe shu hashvi. Until Moshe, who was the 7th. V'kol hashvin chavivin. And this is parenthetically put in by the Frierdiker Rebbe that all 7s are beloved. This was certainly, again, this was the hinting to, this is the final mimer of the previous Rebbe, given over to the 7th generation, which is going to be ours. And so he puts in that really this is like mamish complete blueprints for what is about to take place. That 7 tzaddikim stood up and drew the Shekhinah back down to earth. This is all what I'm saying now comes from the Rebbe's Maimarim on this verse, on this area of the Maimer, that he says, why say Kol Shvin Chavivin? Because all 7s are beloved, not just Moshe who was the 7th. Originally, of course, all 7s are beloved means that Shabbos is a 7th, Shemitah is a 7th, Tishrei is a 7th. In other words, all the things that are 7th are beloved, they're special holy times. But the truth is, the Rebbe wanted to say that our generation is the 7th generation from the Alter Rebbe. 7 generations of Chabad. So since this was a delivery to a 7th generation, therefore he puts here all but 7s are beloved, that when you get to the 7th, something happens, you break the bond, you break the seal. And Moshe was the 7th, Horidu Lamata Ba'aretz. He brought the Shekhinah right back down to the earth, and we know what happened in Moshe's generation. The essence of God returned to earth. Right? So the Torah was given, the Mishkan was built, and the presence of God, which was found in the Gan Eden before the sin of man, it temporarily returned back to earth through Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the 7th. Ve'ikar Gilui Elokus Hayab Beis Hamikdash. And Shlomo is writing, of course, on the first Beis Hamikdash, which was built, which accomplished the same goal again. And he says that the Ikar Gilui Elokus was in the Beis Hamikdash. In other words, that while God's presence was brought down to earth, it sort of focused itself in a certain room. In other words, it wasn't necessarily felt everywhere, where it was felt everywhere, but it wasn't the presence wasn't found in every particular place per se, but it focused itself in the Beis Hamikdash. But as we're going to see, Kasi va'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'socham. But the verse says, make for me a mikdash and I'll dwell within them. B'socho lo ne'amar. It doesn't say I'll dwell within it. If you say make for me a mikdash and I'll dwell within it, that would be the normal thing to say. But it says make me a mikdash and I'll dwell within them. Which means b'socho lo ne'amar elo b'socham. It doesn't say I'll dwell within it, but within them. B'soch kol echad ve'echad. Inside of every single individual. Which means that once Hashem made the mikdash, the Shekhinah dwelt in all of us. And not only that, but even the commandment, Va'asu li mikdash, make for me a temple, and I'll dwell within them, is really saying that it's not necessarily the temple alone, which is the place where the Shekhinah can dwell. But they should make for me a temple of themselves, and then I'll dwell within them. Which means to say that once Moshe basically gave us the Torah, gave us the Mishkan, gave us the blueprints of how to bring Hashem down into this world, it became open game for anybody. Anyone can now access the Ikar Shekhinah, so long as you do what? Make for me a temple. You know, Hashem gave us the design of how to bring the Shekhinah back into the world. that the Ikra Shechina B'Tachtonim Haisa, the main Shechina was below, but the main Gil of the Shechina is found in the Mikdash. Once we have the instructions for a Mikdash, which are given very clearly in the book of Vayikra, but it's really more than that. The instructions for the Mikdash is the whole Torah. In other words, Kol Torah Kula is instructions on how to build a temple out of yourself, how to put yourself in the exact proper definitions and refine yourself to the point that you can be a home for God. So he says, build for me a mikdash and I'll dwell within them, not within it, because it's referring to us. And that's what it says, that tzaddikim yirshu aretz v'yishkenu la'adaleha. Pasuk says, tzaddikim will inherit the earth and dwell forever upon it. And we're going to darshan out this pasuk to explain what we just said. Tzaddikim yirshu aretz means tzaddikim yirshu aretz shu gan eden. The tzaddikim inherit the earth. What does the earth in this pasuk represent? Gan Eden. So it means they inherit Gan Eden. Okay, tzaddikim inherit Gan Eden. I get that. They do some good things. But mipnei ma, what gives them the merit to inherit Gan Eden? Look at the rest of the verse. Lefi shem mashkinim hainu mamshichim v'chines shochein ad marom v'kadosh. Okay, so look back at the original pasuk. You have to sort of use the text here. Go back to the original pasuk. It says tzaddikim yirshu aretz v'yishkenu la'ad aleha. So we're saying tzaddikim yirshu aretz means tzaddikim inherit Gan Eden. But v'yishkenu la'ad aleha, that's what we're going to darshan out right now. Yishkenu, right, means that it could mean they dwell forever on it, but here it also means that they're mashkimim or mamshichim. Yishkenu can mean to draw down. Right? They draw, vayishkenu means they draw down. What are they drawing down? La'ad. The level which is called ad. And what is ad? Shochein ad marum v'kadosh. Right? In other words, we say in davening, right? Shochein ad marum. Right? So the idea is shochein ad, it means he who dwells ad marum v'kadosh, in the up until and including the level called exalted and holy. He who dwells in the level of exalted and holy. Right? So this is what it means. That's basically referring to the essence, the Ikra Shechina. So that why do tzaddikim inherit the earth? Because they're able to yishkanu la'ad. They're able to draw down while they're in this world. They're able to draw down la'ad, the level of shochein ad marom v'kadosh, into this world. In other words, whatever they accomplish in this world, which is called drawing down the level of the Shechina, that gives them the right to inherit Gan Eden when they're done over here.
To bring it down, to bring this light down.
They're able to bring this light down into this world,
That gives them the merit to be.
and that gives them the merit to go into Gan Eden.
Forever.
Right? So reading the passage again, it says tzaddikim yirshu aretz, tzaddikim inherit the Gan Eden. Why? Because they draw down the level of ad in their lifetime in this world.
What about the rest of us?
V'amech kulam tzaddikim. Sometimes the Rabbi adds in here the saying of the sages that, and your people are all tzaddikim, which means that v'asun li mikdash v'shachanti b'socham, make me a temple and I'll dwell within them, is not a directive only to tzaddikim. It's a directive to everybody. Everyone can make themselves a temple. Oh, you don't do it every day, you slip up. Okay, so that's what means you're not a tzaddik. But the point is that when you're doing it, that's what tzaddikim do. So you have the ability to create a home for Hashem. What does it mean to create a home for Hashem? It means you draw down the level of Shechina into this world. We're going to have to explain how, but the process is called making a temple for Hashem. Primarily it's called doing Torah mitzvahs, but it's a little bit deeper than that. And in doing so, you inherit Gan Eden. This is the work of this world, and that's the reward.
Isn't the main thing that Hashem is going to dwell in this world? So what did God in the physical world?
I guess ultimately, this world will also be called the Gan Eden, and they'll dwell here as well. They'll get the reward here as well. Tchias HaMesim. Absolutely.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
Kind of make a big deal. From what I know thus far, which isn't a lot, but in Tanya, it's really perfect definition between Rasha, Begininng, and Tzaddik. And maybe if I worked really, really hard, I'll have a couple perfect days in the end, and I might achieve the level of Begininng, right?
Alavai Beinani.
Very hard.
No, obviously
So
we're not.
It's like it sounds like the Rebbe's. I don't know if we're talking about the same one because we're separate, but it sounds like the Rebbe's trying to win the conversation at both ends. I'm either able to become a tzaddik, or I'm not. If I'm not, then it sounds like. But in the end, I win the game anyway. Like I get like a pass. But what is it really?
Okay, so let me explain as follows. It's all kind of connected, Hasidic, the calendar of Hasidus connected with the holidays. So what we learned in Yutes Kislev prepared us for Hanukkah, which is now preparing us for Yud Shvat. That's how the Maimorim go. But ultimately, we said about Mashiach, the work of Mashiach in the previous Maimorim, is that he's the one who brings the light. In other words, like we said by Shlomo HaMelech, why did Shlomo HaMelech build the Beis HaMikdash in his days? Because Shlomo HaMelech bore inside of him the light of the Beis HaMikdash. Even before Shlomo built the Beis HaMikdash, the light of the Beis HaMikdash was already in the world because Shlomo was in the world. Remember, we talked about this. I don't know if you were there for that. But in other words, Moshe Rabbeinu was the seventh tzaddik, right? So you're right, it was Moshe Rabbeinu who brought this light to the world. But once Moshe Rabbeinu brought the light to the world, the whole Am Yisrael built the Mishkan. In other words, he made available a type of avoda that if you do what Moshe Rabbeinu says, you have a part in his work. To the extent that Moshe himself is not the ultimate tzaddik that he needs to be, unless his flock is doing what it has to do. Why did Moshe not come into Eretz Yisrael and he stayed and he got buried in the Midbar? Because his people didn't make it to Eretz Yisrael, and so therefore he didn't make it to Eretz Yisrael. You're only as good as your generation. So Moshe is still waiting for his generation to finish the job. What's going on, guys?
Oh, there's just spiders.
Spider? It's okay.
He went all the way down here.
And then he went back up to the...
We must have sinned, and we sent him back into the seven heavens there. All right. So, anyway, the idea being is that obviously, we're not playing games with the definitions of tzaddik and begininng. So, but you also have to know something, that not always when it says tzaddik does it mean the tzaddik of the Tanya, right? Sometimes tzaddik is, as the Tanya self-explained, there's the Shem HaMushal, there's the Shem HaToar. There's two meanings of the word tzaddik. One is sort of a borrowed term, which just means basically someone who's more righteous than wicked, and it's not referring to the actual getter and category of a real tzaddik. And sometimes tzaddik means tzaddik mamash, like a real tzaddik who doesn't have a yetzer hara. He killed it from fasting. So over here, when we're reading the pasuk, we can read it in both ways. When it says tzaddikim yishu aretz, because they drew down the shechina. Okay, first and foremost, if you want to keep things kosher, it's the Rebbe. It's the seventh generation's Rebbe that brings down the shechina. It's Moshe Rabbeinu that brings down the shechina. He's the tzaddik who brings down the shechina. Once that's done, we're shluchim, which means that you have access to the tzaddik's powers. He gives you his job to do. He shares with you. It's not that he needs you to do his job for him. It's that he's sharing the ability to bring the Shekhinah down, that it's really his zchut and his inyan, sharing it with you. And so every one of us has a job to play and a role that's put upon us to help, so to speak, the tzaddik build the Mishkan. He's just like Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe gave the orders how to build the Mishkan, but Am Yisrael actually built it. Moshe actually pretty much stayed out altogether from building it. All he did was set it up after they built all the parts. So the same thing is true. It's a shared task. So when it says Amech Kulam Tzadikim, your people are all tzaddikim, there's an element of absolute truth to that. You might say, well, I'm far from a tzaddik, I'm far from a begininng, but you have a godly soul. And the truth is, whenever your godly soul is activated, it's the tzaddik inside of you which is activated. And especially when it's activated in the effort of fulfilling the specific task of the Nasi Ador, it's literally the soul of the tzaddik inside of you which is activated. You also therefore get the merit of bringing down the Shekhinah, playing the role of the tzaddik. We've discussed many, many times over the course of the years that one of the things the Rebbe did for us, which other Rebbeim did not give us, was certain minhagim of tzaddikim that were kept and hidden for the tzaddikim and for the Rebbeim and the Nasiim. They didn't share with the Hasidim. The Rebbe shared with us everything. He gave us sort of new ways of acting, giving us minhagim of tzaddikim, even though we're not tzaddikim, because he was basically pushing through and enabling sort of the level of light of the tzaddik to reside inside of a regular person. This is one of the gifts of of what Mashiach will be able to accomplish. That Mashiach comes, he's Mashiach, but his job at the same time, throwback to what I said in the beginning of this little speech over here, is that one of the things Mashiach does, he gives the whole world the ability to recognize that all they are is Elokus, right? So that what's Mashiach's inyan is not so much that he does it for us, because that's not really an inyan of Mashiach. If Mashiach is doing it for you, it means the world still lacks the ability to do it themselves. That's not Mashiach. So the special tzaddik called Mashiach, unique from all the other ones, is he's able to come down here, bring the light, but in such a way that you can bring the light as well. Because if he didn't do it in such a way, he's not Mashiach. He has to enable us to sort of arrive to this level, this impossible level of divinity. Otherwise, he's just another tzaddik doing the job for us. And that's not really what Mashiach's all about. Mashiach comes to enable every creature to realize that there's nothing but God. Anyway, that is what it is. I hope that's a clear answer.
But also saying through many Gezulim or reincarnations, since we're all in essence Nevado, like we're all one, that it's like our destiny to become tzaddikim because we have that essential quality within our souls.
Yeah, eventually we're going to get it right here. Okay, so let's go on inside. So we said, where are we? Okay, right, I got it. So at the period there. Vezeu Basi Legani begininng l'makom sheyikar betachila. So that's ultimately what it means. I come to my garden, to my chuppah, the place where I originally was. That when Moshe Rabbeinu was going to bring the shechina back to earth, he's bringing Hashem back to his wedding canopy. The idea of the wedding is the fusion of Hashem to the lowest dimension of reality where he originally was fused, right? And why is that? Because the ikr shechina betachtonim haisa. That's because this is kind of a deep conceptual idea of this memory that we're going to have to really try and wrap our heads around. But the ikr shechina betachtonim haisa, that the main shechina, which is like the highest echelons of divinity itself, is specifically in the tachton. That once down here, that once the sin happened and the shechina was removed from the tachton, it was ultimately removed from everywhere. Because the main place that it can be seen is in the tachton. So there's this sort of essence of God whose only place that it can actually show up and present itself is in the tachton. But it's only when the tachton makes a mishkan out of itself. It's only when tachton will allow itself to be a proper kli, a vessel, to hold it. But once it stops being that vessel, then that whole dimension of Elokus doesn't just remove itself from here. It winds up ultimately removing itself from expression altogether. And why is that? Because the ikr shechina, because that level called the ikr shechina is specifically related to the tachton. It's that, because what is it really? It's a sort of notion that God is equal everywhere, as we're going to see and go deeply into, right? That there's dimension of godliness, sort of the essential dimension, which is not more in one place than it is in another place, right? Because that's if it's really essential, then any place at all, he's there. He's there just as much as in any other place. So what's that?
Just say I can be lower and lower.
You could be lower and lower, you could be higher and higher, but the point is that if there's any place which exists, its ability to exist is only because essentially he's there. So this dimension of Elokus specifically shows itself when every single place has admitted and recognized that God is in this place. If there's one place that doesn't recognize that God is in this place, then that level of God, which is in every place equally, can't be anywhere. You understand what we're saying there?
It has to be everywhere at the same time.
Because it's everywhere, if there's one place that does not acknowledge it, it really is showing that it, which is equally found everywhere, is not present. Because if it was present, everywhere would see it equally, or would have access to it equally. You see what I just said there? It's a sort of dimension which finds the way that it exists is it finds itself equally in every place. So if there will be a place which is blocking it from being in that place, from being seen in that place, it means it's not just not in that place. It means you don't have it anymore. It's gone away from the ability to be presented, because if it was there, it would be everywhere equally. The very fact that it's not in one place means it's in no place. It sort of left its presence left the room. Right? And so therefore, that's why it's very, very dependent on the Tachtonim. Because the only place which is going to really have the ability to push it out, or sin, as it were, is us. So the whole, this is how it goes together, that we're this tiny, insignificant thing. Like, you look at the NASA satellites, that's nothing compared to what Hasidus says our smallness is. Because that's just this world. Right? What about infinite spiritual universes? We know how ridiculous of a claim it is to say that we're like the center of the universe. And yet we say it for one very specific reason. We're central in the universe. All the universe depends on us specifically because we're so insignificant. Because if there's a place of insignificance, that's the one place where godliness might not show up. Because it's so small, it's so lowly, it's called the tachton. But if godliness doesn't show up in that place, it ultimately means that you're not grasping the real God. Because the real God, there's no place so small that He won't be. He's everywhere. So there's one little place which like sort of the whole issue hinges on the presence in that place, because the other places, He'll find Himself there, no problem. There's spiritual worlds which experience divine reality. It's only one place, Olam Hazeh, which has the ability to not experience divine reality, and so when we sin, right, we push Him away. And therefore, we're not just pushing Him away from this world, we're pushing Him away from His whole expression not being able to be experienced anywhere. You understand that? And therefore, the Iker Shechina b'tachtonim. Therefore, this Iker Shechina, this level of true divinity, its true place where it can be found is dafka here. Because when we'll open up the Mishkan and allow Him to come in, it flushes into the entire state of existence of all the universes, all realms. You follow why? You getting this?
I'm a bit lost. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Why can't we say that Hashem is in the Tachton, but
Yeah.
the creation just don't perceive Him?
But that's the point. When we don't perceive Him, that's what makes Him. Of course, He's in the Tachton. Of course, God,
Exactly.
the whole point is that there's no such thing that there's no place where this entity is not experienced. But He's not married to it, as it were. In other words, what happens when you sin? It doesn't mean you actually Hashem literally goes away.
Right.
But the Shechina, which is the revelation of God, goes away. You push away. That you push Him out. It doesn't mean He actually leaves, right? But the fact is that you've pushed Him out of, you've made no home for Him here. So the way He has to be here is in a way that He's unseen. The way that He's not able to be accessed. The way that He's not
You said you
not presenting Himself into the space, right? So of course He's there, but what good does He do that He's there if he's not honored in this place? So the fact that He's not here, so to speak, to us, means there's some dimension in his own right that He's not here. There's an aspect where He's been pushed away.
But you said that He's equally, like the Shekhinah is equally everywhere, right?
Yes.
So if it's not in the example, in this lowly place, it means that it's not in the place which is like higher than this?
In other words, once it's not being honored that there's all there is it. Even in one little place, so that's proof that there's something that experiences the reality that not all there is it. Once there's a place which is called not all there is it, that means that it is not fully present. Because if it was fully present, there would be no place that did not experience its glory. So if you take it out of one little dimension, it's like, for example, like a Sefer Torah, right? If you take one letter of a Sefer Torah, one little crown, and you take it off, it's a puzzle Sefer Torah. If you're missing one detail, then you don't have the whole.
So was it ever whole?
Yeah, Iker Shechina b'tachtonim haisa. It was when Hashem created the world in the beginning, when He first made man, before the sin.
So never after that.
Before this, no, then it happened again. Basi Lagani, achosikal. That's exactly what Basi Legani means. I came back to my garden. I remarried the world. When? In the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. Again, in the time of Shlomo.
The Shekhinah was all over the whole world.
The godliness was accepted upon earth. In other words, we made a vessel for Him. Where was the vessel? Primarily in the Beis HaMikdash, as we said, which means no, it was not Mashiach times yet when the whole world became a Beis HaMikdash, but at least He had a holding in this world. And really, it never went away when Moshe.
It was not in the whole world.
Once it's in this world, it's in the world.
It wasn't revealed equally.
It wasn't revealed equally in the entire Tachton, but it got to the Tachton. It made it down all the way to this world, which means there was now no world that didn't experience it, right?
They're just like different like levels of concealment.
So the point is that obviously we didn't finish the job. It's like Moshe Rabbeinu's generation still has not gone into Eretz Yisrael. Moshe came with the Torah and the instructions, here's how to make a mikdash, and he's just waiting outside of Eretz Yisrael for us, the flock, to get it together and make a mikdash out of the whole world. But nonetheless, it didn't go away. The instructions on how to make a mikdash. And the mikdash itself, mind you, the Mishkan of Moshe is still sitting there somewhere. It's buried under the base of mikdash, says the Gemara, and the Rebbe signs on for that, right? That mamish, it's still here. It's hidden. But once Moshe Rabbeinu came to the world, finished. We have the Ikar Shechina here back again, but to bring it to a state of the whole world becomes a Mishkan, that's Amech Kulam Tzadikim. You can't just leave it to the Tzaddik to do it. He did what he had to do. We have to do what we have to. We have to make a Mishkan out of ourselves. We have to bring it into every single, because you're right, there's still a Tachton that it didn't get to. And that little Tachton could be you. It could be your mind. It could be some person that didn't meet yet. So yes, as long as there's a place called the Tachton, it's not there. That level of the Ikar Shechina is in some way lacking from its full gamut of revelation.
When you say they came back,
there can't be one space left, ultimately, which doesn't experience this. So any place which is blind to this
That's going to have to be like he's going to have to break us off a lot of Rahmanut. To get there on our own in this day and age.
It's just, all you have to do is spread the welcomes of Chassidus. That's how you do it.
That's it.
when you say it came back to earth, that means it was hovering on the earth in the beginning? Was that
hovering?
No, it was in the earth. It was in Gan Eden. Before the sin, it was, the whole world was a godly place, experiencing it.
Completely. So there was no sin.
There was no
negativity.
no people.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
So,
if I love God but not with all my heart, so then I broke the continuity and He's nowhere for me?
he's wherever you left him, space, right? So you can have a certain level of revelation, let's say in your head, but if it doesn't go to your heart, or it doesn't go to your action, so yeah, you have a limited aspect of divinity, which means once you have a limited aspect, the real deeper inner level where he's everywhere, you don't have it at all. If there's a space, that's what we talk about, like in, why we call it Tomchei Tamimim. Why is the yeshiva of the Rebbe's called Tomchei Tamimim? Because a Tamim, and we're here to support the Tamimim. A Tamim is someone who's got it straight through. Something that's just tam. The word tam is translated in Aramaic as shalem. It's whole. There's no place where it's missing. Like Pada b'shalom nafshi. You have no more enemies. Only when you have no more enemies is there the true experience of this level. Because it requires all or nothing. Right? So this is where we're shooting for. It's a high bar. But Jews are good at stuff. Yeah.
Do you mean when you say Hashem left the world?
Now I get it.
You getting it?
Yeah,
Okay.
saying it's like the masculine and the feminine energies like separated and
Yeah, the feminine being the concept of separateness.
yeah.
When they're married, that separateness is not a negative; it's a positive, because they're feeling that. Even separateness is married to oneness, right? When they're married, so when they separate, a divorce, God forbid, so the separateness is a true threat to the oneness, and because it doesn't allow the oneness into its place, and therefore the oneness is limited. It's in a state where it's really marred, right? Until we'll allow the marriage to take place again.
Who's more? That's what happened in Gan Eden.
Blemished, scarred.
That's what happened.
That's what happened in Gan Eden. That there was a sin, there was a somewhat of a divorce, and there has to be a remarriage, a repeat, and that happened with Moshe Rabbeinu. It was sin. It wasn't one sin. They pushed him full on out. They didn't just push him out of this place. It's like a person pushed him out first of his. It's like a person, God forbid, you could go off the derech. He doesn't straight away go off the derech altogether. First, he stops doing a little nagelwasser, then eventually this, eventually he keeps Shabbos. Now he's mamash. He tries to go to another religion. In other words, they pushed him further and further away till the world got exceeding. But as the Rebbe points out in his original mimer, the main problem was the first. From going to Eretz to Shamayim was Eretz to the Rakia. That's already did it. In other words, it was done. The damage was done. The Shechina was lost. Just what? It got worse and worse and worse. Because you brought him out of further places and further places and further. You made more of a dark place. But the 7 tzaddikim brought him all the way back. And that's why all the tzaddikim are really incomparable to Moshe. Because just like the main blemish was leaving the earth, once you have one place empty, it's not there anymore. Also reconnecting it, the main one is the 7th. Moshe stands in a completely different realm than all those 6 tzaddikim that came before him, because none of them were able to accomplish the job. Because even bringing it down from the fourth to the third, and the third to the second, you still don't have it. Only when you complete the circuit do you have it. So Moshe's, the seventh is a whole nother dimension of awesome. And that's our generation, mind you. The Rebbe is the seventh. And that's why we're in the generation of Mashiach. This is the generation which is going to complete the circuit, not just of all time. Yeah.
Isn't that somewhat discrediting 1 through 6?
Somewhat, but the way the Rebbe sort of patches that up is that you can't get to a 7 without 1 through 6. And not only that, but the Rebbe says by Moshe Rabbeinu, "B'makom gedolim al ta'amod." He says, Moshe Rabbeinu says of himself, "In the place of great ones, I'll never stand." The humbleness of Moshe says, "Forget it. I could never have gotten it. Like 7th is like a lucky thing. I just popped up lucky number 7." So in other words, it's not because you earned it necessarily. It's not because of your greatness. It's because of your birth order. But nonetheless, Shabbos is Shabbos. Does Shabbos negate, a Thursday? Kind of, but you can't get to Shabbos without a Thursday. So in other words, there's a humility involved, and it knows that it's just a product of what all that came before it. You can't really lose that battle. It's yeah.
Is Moshe in 7 and 8?
Oh, that was like the topic of a fierce, intense conversation at my Shabbos table this week. I think after the maskana of that whole conversation is that once you have 7, you automatically have 8. Because 8 is basically what we're talking about. 7 is sort of like the earth. And once you connect it to the earth, right, then you have this higher power which automatically sets in, which equates heaven and earth. So getting to the 7th is arriving at basically the 8th. You
get from the higher level, so you have
What's the 8th?
Once you hit the bottom, you've equated top and bottom, you have now something which is beyond top and bottom, which is 8, infinity. So I would say that concluding the 7 brings you to 8. Let's hold here. You want to give me your mimers back, or you want to hold on? You have to actually, I'd like you to keep this so you can memorize.
It's also kind of crazy that just kind of hit me with 1 through 7 and 8. You got your 7 notes, an octave, and then you hit 8 and you're at 1 again.
Exactly.
8 is 1.
Exactly, which means you have all of them. But you go up